Oh, I was 38 and had given up a decade and a half of my life to a man who used to kiss my forehead before every flight, who used to tell me that we built this life together. I believed him. While he was shaking hands in boardrooms and collecting industry awards, I was making sure our home was a sanctuary, organizing family holidays, managing every detail behind the scenes, always cheering him on. His name was Tyler Matthews, and for years I thought we were a team. I only started noticing something was wrong when his secretary Megan began treating me like a stranger at corporate events. No eye contact, no small talk. Once I reached out to shake her hand, and she gave me a look like I was the help. I brushed it off. Until the second time I caught her whispering with Tyler, and suddenly they stopped laughing when I walked in. Then came the first real crack. I received a notice from the bank about a change in account ownership. It was a joint account ours. I confronted Tyler. He called it a clerical error. I wanted to believe him, but that night I checked our safe and saw the folder labeled estate documents had been moved. I opened it. My name was missing from the latest version of the will. Not revised. Gone. As if I had never existed. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had not signed anything. I had not agreed to anything. And yet the man I trusted with my life had already begun writing me out of it. Friends at the office, ones I thought were on my side, were strangely quiet. I began to notice the subtle glances, the way people avoided my eyes. One night, I heard Megan's voice through the break room door laughing, "She will not even see it coming." And everyone laughed. Everyone. That is when the truth hit me harder than betrayal ever could. They did not just plan to leave me. They planned to erase me. And while I stood in that hallway, invisible to everyone who once clapped for me at board dinners, I realized something. If I wanted to survive, I had to stop waiting for fairness. I had to start planning. And I would. The day after I found the will, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Tyler came in late, the scent of some overpriced cologne lingering on his shirt, one I had not bought him. He kissed my forehead like nothing was wrong, then disappeared into the bathroom with his phone clutched tightly. That was when I stopped being sad. I stopped trying to understand him. I started thinking like someone preparing for war. While he showered, I went into his office. He had always told me not to bother with his work files. That should have been a red flag. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop, half expecting it to be password protected. It was not. The arrogance, the stupidity. And there it was, dozens of emails between him and Megan. Subject lines like strategy for clean exit prenup loopholes, and worst of all, she will not fight back. They spoke about me like I was a temporary employee about to be laid off. Megan had even sent him links to luxury condos under his name only. My name did not appear once. 15 years of my life, and they were scrubbing me out like a typo. One thread caught my attention, scanned images of legal documents. I opened them and nearly vomited. My signature, my handwriting, was on papers I had never seen. They were divorce documents dated 2 months ago, and I was listed as having already agreed to waive spousal support and claim no stake in his business. The forged signature was not even close. Sloppy, but legally dangerous. My hands trembled as I printed every file, every thread, every invoice labeled executive retreat. That was really a romantic weekend with his secretary. By morning, I had an entire folder thick with evidence. But I did not cry. I did not scream. I called an attorney instead. Not just any lawyer. I called Madison Clark, the kind who had made entire corporate boards weep in court. I emailed her everything. She replied in less than an hour, "This will be fun." And then I played my part. I smiled at Tyler when he came down for breakfast. I poured his coffee, asked about his meetings, and nodded like I had no idea he was planning to destroy me. I went to his work parties, hugged people I now knew, had laughed behind my back, and played the clueless wife they all thought I was. But beneath the calm, I was building something. I was learning who I could use. And I found my first ally in the most unlikely place, Josh Reynolds, Tyler's business partner. Quiet, observant, and just as suspicious of Megan as I was. He leaned in at a cocktail party and said, "You look like a woman with a secret." I smiled and replied, "Not yet, but soon." If you're already angry for Peyton, drop a comment and hit subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Josh Reynolds was not just a business partner, he was Tyler's best man at our wedding. At the time, I thought it was because they respected each other. Now I realize Josh had always watched Tyler the way you watch someone you do not fully trust. After that cocktail party, we met again once at a bookstore near my attorney's office, and again at a quiet cafe where nobody would recognize us. I told him just enough to open the door. He walked through it willingly. What I did not know yet was that Josh had been collecting his own suspicions long before I arrived. Megan had been redirecting funds. At first, it looked like bad accounting. Then he noticed travel expenses labeled research during weekends when no meetings were scheduled. She was billing the company for hotels in cities where Tyler just happened to be speaking. He had seen one photo online of them together. A tagged Instagram post from a hotel lounge she tried to untag later. He had been watching ever since. When I told him what I found the forged signature, the emails, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled like he had been holding it for weeks. "He always underestimated you," he said. They both did. From there, the plan started to take shape. Quietly, carefully. We would not go to the board yet. We would build a case they could not deny. Josh began digging into payroll records. I tracked every move Tyler made at home. I planted a camera in his study. I mirrored his phone. The man who taught me how to set up Wi-Fi in our first apartment had no idea I was using everything he taught me to watch him unravel. Every new piece of evidence made my hands shake. Not from fear, but from fury. He was transferring stock options to an account under Megan's name. He had created a holding company and funneled over $180,000 into it across 5 months. She was not just helping him betray me. She was preparing to take over completely. There was even a document naming her as the company's potential strategic PR advisor, which meant if Tyler managed to push me out quietly, she would replace me both at home and in the boardroom. I laughed when I saw it. Cold, breathless laughter. Because they thought I would fold. They thought I would disappear quietly, maybe, with a settlement check and a gag order. But I was not going anywhere. What they failed to understand was that I had already transformed. The version of Peyton they were trying to erase was gone. What stood in her place was someone they had not met yet. Someone who knew the law, who understood leverage, who had allies now. And Josh. He was all in. Not for me, not yet, but for the company. "We built this," he said, "and I will be damned if I let those two destroy it." I smiled cold and calm. "Then let us begin." Josh and I worked like shadows, never in daylight, never loud. We exchanged information through encrypted drives and late-night phone calls that ended before anyone could trace them. But no matter how far we dug, the full picture kept feeling incomplete. I had the bank transfers, the travel records, the altered will, and the forged signatures. It was all damning. But I needed something bigger, something that would not just damage Tyler's image, but shatter it. And then I found it. One evening, I returned home early while Tyler was stuck at the office. That lie was no longer even subtle. He had left his briefcase out, which he almost never did. Something about the way it sat on the chair, unzipped, half exposed, felt deliberate, as if he wanted me to look, but not too hard. I opened it anyway. Inside was a crumpled envelope with a return address from a women's health clinic in Portland. Not our city, not even our state. My breath caught. I pulled out the enclosed form. It was a birth certificate. I stared at the line labeled Father Tyler Matthews, and under Mother Megan Harris. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. My knees buckled, and I sat down the paper, shaking in my hands. The child had been born last year, while Tyler and I were still trying IVF for the second time. While I was injecting hormones into my stomach and crying in bathrooms between meetings, he was starting a secret family with the woman who answered our phone calls. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It had a name, a birth date, a weight, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. My rage was no longer cold, it burned. I made copies of everything: birth records, Paternity confirmation. Megan's medical visits, paid through the company card. There was no PR strategy in the world that could clean this up, and I was not going to wait for a scandal. I was going to time it. Josh was stunned. They hit a child on the books, he muttered, reading the files. This could bring the board to its knees. I nodded, but I was not finished. I requested Megan's corporate expense records through a dummy HR complaint. They came back riddled with inconsistencies, five-star hotels on intern retreats, designer boutiques listed under client acquisition, and dozens of cross-state mileage reimbursements where no client ever existed. I forwarded it all to Madison, my attorney. She called me that night. "This is no longer just divorce," she said. "This is criminal." That was the moment I knew I did not need to scream. I did not need to throw glasses or flip tables. I was going to let the truth do all the damage. And when it landed, it would not just be loud, it would be irreversible. For 15 years, I was the quiet wife who smiled through silence. Now I was the storm they never saw coming. And I was just getting started. There is something oddly satisfying about waiting for the perfect moment to detonate a truth bomb. Timing is everything. Too soon, and you look vindictive. Too late, and the damage becomes irreversible. But just right, it is unforgettable. And I had chosen the perfect stage, the company's 25th anniversary gala. A black tie event attended by executives, board members, press, investors, and spouses. The kind of event where public image was currency and secrets could shatter empires. Tyler spent the entire week bragging about the keynote speech he was preparing. Megan spent it posting cryptic countdown photos with champagne emojis. They thought it was going to be their night. And they were right. Just not in the way they expected. Josh and I had prepared everything. He would open the evening with a short, welcome, nothing unusual. Then, midway through the event, he would present what Tyler believed was a legacy tribute video. Except it was not. The opening clip was harmless. Tyler shaking hands with former clients, a few stage smiles, some charity work. Then it cut to a silent screen, with a line of text. "The version you have been told ends here." I stood at the back of the ballroom, calm and still in a black dress. I had chosen deliberately sharp lines, high collar, minimal jewelry. It was not the look of a grieving wife. It was the look of someone attending a burial. The screen faded into documents, one after another. The paternity test with Tyler's name, the expense reports, the forged divorce documents, all projected for every single person in that room to see. You could hear the silence sharpen. Megan froze. Tyler's face dropped. Gasps followed. And then came the final slide, a time-stamped photo of Tyler and Megan entering a luxury hotel paid for by the company on the same weekend he told the board he was in Singapore. Josh stepped up to the mic. His voice did not shake. This company was built on trust. Tonight, we discover who broke it. Security appeared before Megan could run. She tried anyway. Tyler stood, frozen lips parted like he wanted to speak, but no words came. People began whispering. Phones lit up. Board members left their tables and walked out in a line. I turned and walked through the lobby like the fire behind me was not mine to put out. In the elevator, Josh looked over. "You good?" I smiled, almost wistful. "No, but I will be." When I got home, I poured a glass of wine and watched the video go viral. Within hours, Tyler was suspended pending investigation. Megan's name trended on every platform, but I did not post a thing. I let the silence speak for me. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without checking if he had come home, because now he had nowhere to go. And I had already moved on from the person who ever waited. The morning after the gala, the world had changed, but not for me. I still made coffee in the same mug, still let sunlight pour through the kitchen window, still watered the houseplants that Tyler once mocked for being pointless decor. But outside these walls, everything he built was burning. The press latched onto the story like wolves. Headlines splashed across every financial and entertainment outlet. CEO accused of fraud and infidelity during company anniversary. Double life exposed by wife's silent evidence. Even without attaching my name to it, everyone knew who started the avalanche. Tyler tried to control the narrative, of course. A poorly written press release claimed it was a misunderstanding. He called me, left voicemails laced with desperation, then rage, then pathetic pleas. I did not answer. I did not need to. His reputation had collapsed faster than I imagined. Within a week, the board voted him out permanently. He lost the stock options he once protected more than his marriage. Megan's employment was terminated for cause, and a full forensic audit was launched. Her personal accounts were frozen while they investigated company theft. Her name vanished from every company profile by noon. I watched from the outside, silent and still. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally free. For the first time in years, I opened my windows without checking if anyone could see in. I wore red lipstick on a Tuesday. I walked into my attorney's office in heels that made no apology for their sound. Madison handed me the settlement paperwork. The board offered me a multi-million-dollar payout in exchange for keeping certain evidence sealed. She expected me to celebrate. But I felt something more complicated, something like sorrow. Not for them. For me. For the version of myself that spent so many years believing loyalty would be returned in kind. That if I sacrificed quietly, I would be loved louder. I signed the papers not because I wanted their money, but because it was mine. I earned every dollar with every lie I let pass, every smile I gave Megan when I wanted to scream. This was not a gift, it was repayment for time, stolen, energy, drained, and dignity denied. At home, I boxed up everything Tyler had left behind. His cufflinks, old notes, the cheap cologne he switched to during the affair, I dumped it all into a donation bag. Not out of anger, out of indifference. Then I opened my laptop and began to write. I called the essay Erased but Not Broken. It was not about Tyler. It was about every woman who was told to smile through betrayal, to settle for survival instead of demanding justice. I posted it anonymously. By midnight, it had 30,000 shares. Women began messaging me, telling me their stories. Some asked if I would write more. Others just said, "Thank you." That was the moment I realized my voice was never gone. It was just waiting for the right moment to speak. And now I would never be silent again. I never planned on becoming a voice for anyone but myself. Yet after that essay spread across the internet like wildfire, something shifted. Women from every corner of the country, and even abroad, poured into my inbox. Some wrote full paragraphs, others just sent a line or two. But all of them shared one thing: they had been betrayed and silenced just like me. I was no longer alone, and neither were they. I kept writing not because I had anything to prove, but because I had something to say. I turned my pain into power, my silence into structure. I shared strategies, red flags, lessons, and reminders that self-worth was not something you begged for. It was something you enforced. A publisher offered me a book deal. I turned it down. I did not want to turn this story into something for sale. Not yet. I needed to live it. I moved out of the house Tyler and I once shared. It was never really mine anyway. I bought a modest home by the coast. Not flashy, not enormous, but quiet. Peaceful. Mine. I spent mornings walking the beach, barefoot, collecting shells, watching the tide roll in and out like clockwork. The ocean became my therapy. Constant. Unapologetic. Cleansing. One afternoon, Josh showed up. Not announced, just there. He stood on the porch in a navy coat and jeans, holding 2 coffees, and that same thoughtful look he always wore when the world got too loud. "I figured you might like to know Megan has left the country. No one knows where." I nodded. "And Tyler?" I asked. He shrugged, still blaming everyone but himself. That sounded right. He looked at me and said, "I know this might not be the right time, but if you ever wanted to talk about starting fresh." His voice trailed off. I did not answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because I had finally learned not to rush what deserved time. I smiled at him, soft but steady. "Maybe someday," I said. He nodded, then handed me the coffee and left. That night, I sat on my porch and listened to the waves. I thought about who I had been. The wife who always showed up. The woman who sacrificed without question. the one who assumed loyalty was a given and fairness was a promise. I mourned her. Then I honored her by letting her go. Because here is what I finally understood: betrayal does not destroy you, it introduces you to the version of yourself who refuses to stay small. I am Peyton Williams. I was never erased. I was rewritten by my own hand. And while I do not know what comes next, I know this much: no one else will ever get to hold the pen again. Now it is your turn. If this story moved, you speak up, share your voice, reclaim your ending, start writing yours. Some people think revenge ends when the villain falls, but that is not true. Sometimes it ends in the quiet that follows, in the choices you make after the ashes settle, in how you choose to exist when no one is watching anymore. That was the hardest part: not exposing Tyler, not surviving Megan, not even building my new life. It was facing the silence that followed and realizing I had the freedom to fill it however I wanted. For the first time in almost 2 decades, no one was waiting on my reaction. There were no more veiled insults at boardroom dinners, no fake smiles at networking events, no tracking which tone of voice would upset him the least. It was just me. And the weight of that freedom was both thrilling and terrifying. Tyler's name faded from the headlines within months, replaced by newer scandals. He moved out of state, I heard, somewhere remote and quiet, where people would not recognize his face or ask too many questions. Megan had vanished completely. A friend told me she had changed her last name. It almost made me laugh. Reinvention was something she had always pretended to understand, but now she was doing it for survival, not style. Josh and I stayed in touch, though we remained just friends. He sent updates sometimes, mostly about the company. It had stabilized, recovered, and surprisingly grown after Tyler's departure. Apparently, removing dead weight can do wonders. He never pressured me for anything more, and I respected him all the more for it. Still, there were moments when I wondered what would it feel like to trust again, to start something new without history hanging like fog between every conversation. But I did not rush. I had learned that healing does not follow a calendar. Some days I felt strong and unstoppable. Other days I walked by a stranger wearing Tyler's cologne and felt my chest tighten. Triggers do not mean you are broken. They mean you are human. I kept writing. Eventually, I started a podcast anonymous, at first just my voice and a microphone. Women tuned in. They called it fierce, soft, and surgical. I liked that, the duality of it, because that is who I had become: someone who could destroy lies with evidence and still cry over a song on the radio. Someone who held both rage and grace in the same breath. I did not seek out justice to punish Tyler. I sought it because I had been erased. And erasure is not just forgetting, it is being rewritten without your permission. I took the pen back. And in doing so, I found my voice. Not just the version that says I survived, but the one that says I choose. Because that is what healing really is. Not forgetting what happened, but refusing to let it be the only thing that defines you. And if you're listening, if you have been erased, replaced, betrayed, know this: you are not finished. You are just beginning. It is strange how the world keeps spinning after everything falls apart. Grocery stores still open at 8 a.m. Traffic still hums outside the window. Seasons still change. And yet you are no longer the same person who existed before the storm. That was me walking through the quiet of my new life, watching leaves change color outside my window, wondering how I had survived something designed to break me. But I had. Not just survived, but rebuilt. Not just rebuilt, but redefined what it meant to be whole. I began finding joy in the smallest moments again. Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, the scent of fresh bread, the way an old woman smiled at me when I let her cut the line. I had spent years trading those simple moments for a version of love that demanded silence and sacrifice. Now, I was learning to take them back. I was not chasing a new relationship or trying to fill the space Tyler left behind. I was learning to stand in the middle of it and let it echo, because echo is not emptiness. It is a reminder you still have space to grow. The podcast took off slowly then, all at once. Listeners shared episodes with friends, then coworkers, then strangers on the internet. I began receiving letters from women who had left toxic marriages, reported workplace abuse, walked out of homes they were told to tolerate. They called me brave. But I was not brave, not always. I was simply no longer willing to be quiet about injustice. One message stood out. A woman named Eliza wrote, "You did not just tell your story. You gave me permission to rewrite mine." That was when I finally understood what all of this had become. My pain, once weaponized against me, had become a tool for others. My scars were not shameful. They were signposts for women still lost in the fog. As for Tyler, I never heard from him again. I doubt I ever will. But I did not need closure from him. I gave it to myself. My revenge was never about watching him suffer. It was about reclaiming the parts of me he thought he could erase. One afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror, the same one where I used to check if my makeup looked soft enough for him, and whispered, "You are no longer someone's afterthought." Because I am not. I am Peyton Williams. I am 39. And I am not broken, discarded, or erased. I am proof that you can be betrayed and still rise. That silence can be shattered. That power can be rebuilt quietly, boldly, and entirely on your own terms. And now I want to hear from you. If this story moved, you share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, justice, and healing. Your voice matters. Let it be heard.